Money 101 talk. What is money? And this is going to be a little bit more of a philosophical conversation. Because, like the quote says, the most difficult thing is to get rid of the fiat mindset. We'll define all these terms, which is to say, to step back and ask yourself very simple questions about money. Why do we have it? Why do we need it? Why does it have to be scarce? Why can some people print it while most people have to work for it? And so on. These are hard questions. Mostly because we've just taken our entire system for what it is, because that's what we've always lived with, right? So we don't really question it. So I wanted to discuss a little bit about what it is and what you guys think it is. So first, I just wanted to start with, like, what is money to you guys? What do you think it is? Or what does it mean to you?
Oh, is this an interactive thing?
Indeed.
Buy stuff that you need.
Transactional value.
Energy
Freedom.
exchange.
Oh, freedom. I like this one.
But we've always gone with the to be able to do what you want when you want for as long as you want, whatever that would get you.
Monique, anything?
Yeah, I said it's an energy exchange for me. And it's a source it's a source where I can have the experiences that I want to have in this lifetime experience on planet Earth, in this dimension, in this timeline.
I love that. I love that.
Yay. Okay, so what actually is money? I do have a couple of videos, so we'll play them.
Unless you've been living under a rock the past couple of years, you can probably sense that something is seriously wrong in the world today. People are increasingly desperate to make ends meet. A cultural sickness has gripped our world. Trust in social institutions worldwide is collapsing. What if I told you that the source of all this socioeconomic sickness was something hidden in plain sight? Something essential to human cooperation, something as old as civilization itself. As we explore in this show, money, which is humanity's most important technology, has been corrupted. Money is a prism through which we perceive the world, and its corruption affects how we think, how we act, and how we treat one another. In the game of money, if you're unaware of how it is being played, then in all likelihood, you are the game being played. Although we think through money almost every single day when we're buying and selling, rarely do we stop and think about the nature of money. Rarely, if ever, do we stop to ask ourselves, what is money? My name is Robert Breedlove, and this is the
Get over it. Money is not like the cornerstone of civilization, and not all civilizations even use money. Not all societies use money even right now. So it's not the oldest thing. It's not our greatest tool, nor our greatest invention. I just want to say that. Nor is it necessary for cooperation. It is useful for cooperating with large groups of people and getting agreement that we have agreed that this thing is valuable, but it's not essential for cooperation.
Do you know of any civilizations right now that don't use money other than, I guess, like the ones in the Amazon that are small tribes, or those who you're talking about?
But yeah, I mean, talking about like Amazon tribes, Aboriginals, and other places. But like, I mean, just because they aren't industrialized doesn't make them not civilizations. And civilization is kind of a hard, but they are a society and we are a society. We just have different structures. And these things that people say that are like essential to civilization, or like what is society and stuff, is so like Euro-Western focused that they forget that there's other types of like economies, there's other types of like there's patriarchies and matriarchies and other types of systems and everything. And money is one of those things that it's not always treated in the same way in every society. Some societies don't need it to function at all, and maybe that's just because they're small. you know? And I think that money is very useful for larger groups of people, but it's also less important in different civilizations and societies as well.
Could it also just be a larger heading where the money is really just something that you trade for something else, which would be in other societies? So I have a squirrel that I killed, and you have
But that's a different type of money.
Yeah.
Money requires that there's some sort of, like, you've agreed that this one thing is valuable and that you trade that one thing, and its innate value is because you agree that this thing is valuable, rather than barter system, which is what you just described. I have this thing that you find valuable. Maybe I have 12 squirrels, and this person has a bucket that I want, and I offer them my 12 squirrels, and they're like, well, I also have 12 squirrels, so I don't find your squirrels valuable, but this other person might, but they don't have something that I want. And that barter system is how that works. But like, I can't just trade squirrels, because somebody has to value it for themselves. Money is valuable to everybody because its innate nature is that it is akin to value, as far as we have agreed to that.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose one question that I would have to ask is that in this space, in this time, in this world, is there an option for not having money, or just defining it in a different way?
There's always an option, but it depends on where you are. You could move to the Amazon. There are communes. There are, like, literally, that's what a commune is. People don't use money in societies within other societies. So like, I was reading a book that there was a commune in Wales, you know, and so that's inside of a capitalist economy and a capitalist society. But there are people who have chosen to live outside of that. People that live off grid essentially live without money in the same way. You know, they usually need it for some things, but you don't have to. You can opt out.
Yeah, and Burning Man too. I mean, that's like sort of a microcosm of a large community, actually, like a large city where this is an experiment in we're not using money.
True,
Right.
but no one got to Burning Man without spending money.
That's true.
You had to buy your travel tickets and your
because that's
whatever.
you're in this larger society, and then you're going, and then that exists there, and then you go to this smaller society, and within that society you have structured a different economic system, essentially.
So we kind of already talked about a couple of these things about, you know, the social convention, that it's really just a belief system. Monique hit on it being, you know, time and energy, that it's like a store of her energy. We touched on medium of exchange, where you can actually use this money to then exchange for goods and services. And it also sort of functions as the society's economic nervous system, per se, right? So it's the money is sort of signaling about the value scarcity of different goods and services and the prices, and it's kind of like the barometer of, you know, it's information about what's going on in the system and what our economic society, you know, values, I guess. So there's 3 essential functions of money. The first one we've already talked about, medium of exchange. It has to be widely accepted for the goods and the services, eliminating the efficiencies of the barter system, which we talked about, you know, because the problems with the barter system is like, you might value this thing, but like, I don't value it, so I don't want it, right? And then that doesn't really work, right? So yeah, so there's that. Then it has to be a unit of account. So there has to be like a standardized measurement of this thing that everybody values. And then it has to be a store of value. So it should retain its purchasing power over time, so that you can, you know, you want to be able to have this money now and still be able to use that money in the future for something else, because it's like a time thing, right? I thought this was kind of funny.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Hi, I'm here to make a deposit.
Sure, I'll be more than happy to help you.
Here we go. Just this
Uh,
banana. Sort of squeeze it into the...
Where you
I
gonna
don't want
deposit
no
the banana to?
Here, to this bank.
I'm sorry, sir, but we don't accept bananas.
Okay, well, here, this is worth a little bit more. Maybe this will work. It's a painting of two of my favorite birds.
There's no way for me to deposit this directly into your account, sir,
Why not?
because it's not cash. It's not a check.
Well, here, let's try one more thing. This is Hippie. It's my hippo. I've had him for about 27 years. He's very valuable to me. I'd say he's worth about $1,000.
I know you pay money for these items, but there's no way for me to put them into your account, sir.
Okay. I guess I'll have my stuff back then.
Have a good day, sir.
So, obviously that was pretty ridiculous. And obviously these three...
I thought that was pretty ridiculous, but it was pretty funny. Yeah, so these things, that's not money. Okay, so defining what money, currency, and fiat are differently. So like the summary is that fiat is currency and currency is money, but all money is not currency or fiat. So money is anything that fulfills those three requirements, right? So the store of value, the unit, and the exchange. Currency, though, is going to be a specific form of money that's usually circulated within a culture or a government. It's what we actually use to exchange goods and services in our specific economies, right? So the examples are the US dollar, the euro, the yen. Those are our current currencies. But in the past, we've used gold was the primary currency for a very, very long time. And then fiat is a specific type of currency. So fiat is just basically the definition for when the government decrees that it has intrinsic value or that it's backed by a commodity. And it's just the government saying, it is. We're just telling you that it does have value. So anything that the government decrees is considered a fiat currency versus gold is not a fiat currency because the government is not saying it has value, right?
And I think it's important to note here that at a certain point in time, US dollar was equated with gold. It was backed by gold, and the gold standard was abandoned, I believe, in the 70s. I'm not
71. I have a slide on that.
Okay, great. So, and that's kind of, it would be interesting to talk about the evolution of that and how that relates to our current situation. I'm sure you're going to do that.
Yeah, definitely important. Yeah, I thought it was cool that the word fiat comes from the Latin for "let it be done."
Make it so. Make it so.
Yeah, it's basically just the government saying, "Let it be done." It is. Boom, magic. Yeah, so that's basically all of our modern currencies are fiat. Yeah, and they did used to be backed by gold, but I don't think any of them are backed by gold now. That's kind of a problem. But let's go first into then the 7 essential properties of money. So this is super important because when you think about what do we use as money, why do we use those certain things as money? So durability. Money has to withstand the physical wear and tear. So it has to be able to be durable over time, right? This is why gold was used for a really long time because it's very durable. It doesn't disappear, right? Verifiable. So that means you can authenticate it as it actually is the thing. It's hard to counterfeit. So kind of like how US dollars, a lot of people will just print something that looks like it, right? And then it's really pretty easy to counterfeit unless you're checking, making sure that it is what it is. Acceptability. So it's widely recognized and accepted. everybody just says, yes, you know, we accept this as our currency, which is, you know, the US dollar right now. And other major currencies like the Japanese yen and the euro, like these are all widely accepted. Fungibility, which is a fun little word, basically just means that it's like each part is identical. So, you know, you have, you know, like if you were using bananas, right, you'd be like, well, this banana and that banana, but this banana is bigger than that banana, so it's not exactly the same, right? But if you're talking about like a gold coin, you're like, okay, it's, you know, it's a gold coin and it has exactly the same amount, weight, size as his other gold coin. So it's the unit is interchangeable. Scarcity. This is also going to be a very important one. So good money is scarce. It's limited and the supply is controlled. Not by outside people, but naturally the supply is controlled. This is again why gold has been so valuable, because up until this point, right, gold was the form of money that was the most scarce. However, just note that we still can mine for gold. So there's not like a cap on it. So you can still increase the supply of gold, but it's a lot more scarce than, say, you know, diamonds or, you know, shells, you know, like these things, you could just go to the beach. Like it doesn't make it good money if you can just go to the beach and like pick up a shell and be like, oh yeah, I just sort of like found this money on the ground. So it needs to be scarce so that you can't just do that, and that nobody can just make more of it. Because you make more of it, well then what value does it have? And then the sixth one is portability. So you need to be able to move around with it, especially in this day and age when people are moving around a lot. You need to be able to carry it, transfer it. So this is actually where gold kind of falls apart, because it's not easy to transport large sums of gold, especially overseas, or like anything that's physical, right? So this is why we started to use these fiat currencies, like the coins and the dollars, because those are like paper, they're lightweight, you can just stick them in your wallet and go. And then we started to move towards digital US dollars, where you can write a check and that has value. And then you have money, but like, how much cash do you actually have? You don't. If you think about where your money actually is now, how much of it is actually on you? Like
I don't know that I ever have more than like $2 on me at any given moment.
Yeah. So even that, like even the dollars or the euros that you're using, right? Those have their limitations too. I mean, part of the reason why, you know, I don't carry around large sums of cash, right, is because I don't want to lose it. I don't want to be like, oh, I went out and somebody stole my money out of my bag. So instead, we've started to move towards this digital economy, right, where now we still have the US dollar, but it's in the computer. Or it's on a credit card. You know, we are like, well, this is my money. It's just this card, which tells me that I will pay you in the future. So portability is important. And then the last one is divisibility. So you need to be able to divide it up, because you don't want to be like, well, I have like an ounce of gold, but I don't want to give you a whole ounce of gold to buy the banana. So it's going to be really hard to chop that gold up to get the banana, right? So a better money is going to be something where you can divide it up. Technically, you can chop up gold into smaller pieces. You can buy coins, gold bars. So it can be split into smaller units, but it does have some limitations. Whereas, the US dollar, we've got it down to as little as like, a penny, right? So you can divide that up into smaller amounts. Yeah, and then I don't know if Rihanna has any anthropological additions to how these requirements evolved, but they basically just emerged from, over time, humans having kind of created these rules because this is actually what seemed to work for society. But we've never really had one that meets all of these characteristics. And so that has been sort of, an issue over time. But yeah, any failure of any single property compromises the entire system. Okay, this was kind of cool. Some Stanford or Harvard researchers or something, they did a study with Minecraft where they took 1,000 AI agents and they placed them in a Minecraft server without an instruction about economics or society or anything. And they told it, go do your thing. And the Minecraft AI agents developed their own civilization, their own government, their own culture, and their own economic systems. And what 1,000 AI agents came up with was that gems were the best money. They did select emeralds as the best currency, even though it doesn't have any practical utility, right? So to say that a money needs to have some inherent value or have practical utility is not true. That's not one of the 7 things that makes money money, or that it needs to be money. So I had a little conversation with Chester about this as well, and I was like, "Hey, tell me more about this." And we talked about it, and he was like, "Yeah, I mean, it meets most, it meets most of those 7 essential properties, except the only thing that's missing is the transferability, right? The portability, I guess, because we live in a digital world. So the only thing missing was digital transferability across long distances. You can't pay for, I was like, well, hey, I pay for goods and services in Europe, when I have my hypnotherapist, I pay her in the UK, like I can't send gems to her. So that doesn't work, right? Maybe it worked in this ancient Minecraft society where everybody's in the same place and they all are just, like what Brianna's saying, like they're in a small community and they can just walk over to the house and, deliver the money, right? But in the world we live in now, that doesn't work. It's not practical. Okay, so the evolution of money through history. We kind of went over this a little bit, but so it started out as money was basically commodities were money. So it was whatever was sort of naturally the most scarce. So they used things like shells and beads. And at one point they even used salt because salt was so scarce and it was such a precious commodity that was actually used as money in some societies. And then eventually the precious metals like gold and silver sort of emerged as the primary commodity monies for a very long time. Up until about, up until recently, to be honest. So in the early 1900s, we had our paper fiat currencies that were backed by precious metals like gold. So you could say for my $1 it actually represented, I could exchange that $1 for a certain amount of actual gold or silver that was held in a bank or a reserve or something like that, right? And this is what people actually did. As our world started to get a little bit more global, though, that didn't really work for countries that were like, well, I hold US dollars, but I really want to exchange that for gold now, but the gold is sitting in a bank across an ocean. And so now it's going to take me months for me to get my money, out. So there were some problems with that. But for a while, the US dollar was backed by gold. And our economy worked pretty well for a while there. But in 1971, Nixon decided to abandon the gold standard. And now the US dollar is not backed by gold. It's now just fiat currency that is just backed by the US government. It is what the government says it's valued at. We'll go into like why that's a problem. So what happened is, instead of gold backing the value of the US dollar, now the central banks for these countries are controlling the money supply. And, there's some good things and bad things that come out of that, right? In the short term, this gives the country, the central banks, a lot of control over fixing problems when they come up. So if you have a war and you need a lot more money, you can literally just print the money and kind of go into debt. And then now you have more money and you can fight the war, and, it's all great. And you can do that because it's not backed by gold. So they've been, it's been more flexible. And so this has only been since 1971. So this is kind of, an experiment. And I have some graphs that we'll go over. And now, as you know, we're in a digital world, a digital economy. And so now even our US dollars are essentially digital. And so we're moving into an era of digital money in general. So then when we look at how different forms of money stack up, like, you can kind of see, like, are they a medium of exchange? Are they a good store of value? Do they have a unit of account? Are they durable? Are they scarce? When you look at history, right? So the shells and the salt, they had limited medium of exchange, as you can imagine. It's not everywhere. You can't get it everywhere. Really poor store of value. Salt just, it just disappears in water. The unit of account is also limited. How do you know that one shell is the same size as another shell? The durable is not durable at all. And it could be scarce or not scarce. So then we move to gold coins. Okay, now it has a better medium of exchange. It has a very good store of value. It's been around for forever. Pretty good unit of account, like we discussed. It's hard to chop it up, but it can be chopped up. And it's extremely durable, and it's very scarce. It's the most scarce commodity that we have so far. Then we have the US dollar paper, which is the one that we've been using. It's a great medium of exchange because everybody uses it. It's widely accepted. It does not have the best store of value, which we'll go into. It has a very good unit of account. It's moderately durable, but this is why they have to print money, because the dollars get, torn, or they get wet and they disintegrate, or they get burned up. Like, it's not the most durable at all. And a huge problem with that is that it's not scarce at all. There's no scarcity. And then when you move to digital US dollars, it's more durable, but that's really the only change. And then when you move to Bitcoin, It doesn't really have a medium of exchange right now because it's not widely accepted, but it's a very good store of value. It does have a unit of account. It's extremely durable, and it's the scarcest commodity that's ever existed because it's fixed, because you can't ever create any more of it. So it's more scarce than gold.
I would argue a little bit that its durability is not that great because I'm petrified of losing it in any number of ways.
Yeah, I think that's a good, well, I mean, I think that's a good point. It's not that it's not durable. It is durable, but it's like, so if you think of like a gold coin is extremely durable, right? It's not going to be like burned up in a fire.
Well,
It's not
it
gonna
could get burned
disintegrate.
up in a fire. I mean,
Okay, in a hot enough fire, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it
Yeah,
could.
but like if it's on the stove, you know, you're not like,
But even if you did melt the gold, it would still be
it's
gold.
still valuable.
It would still be gold. Yeah.
Yeah, it would still be gold, even if you melt it. So it's extremely durable, extremely durable. That doesn't say that you could lose it. Could you misplace your very durable good? Yes. And Bitcoin's the same. You can lose your very durable good, but you know, you can store your Bitcoin in something, or you can store gold, right? It's kind of the same. So then this is something else. So you'll hear a lot of times like hard money, soft money, sound money. Like, what the fuck do these all mean in reality? So when they say hard money basically just means that it's really difficult to produce more of it. So they can't really increase the supply or the production, right? And there's a term called stock to flow. And the stock to flow ratio essentially means you have your existing supply of something. We'll say gold. You have an existing supply of gold. And then you divide that by the annual production of gold, or the amount mined, or like how much new gold is added to the supply every year, right? And then that's their stock to flow number. And when you think about US dollars, right, you have your existing supply of US dollars, and then how much, you know, how many more US dollars are printed every year. It's not scarce, so that stock to flow number is going to be, you know, like much lower. So gold has a very high, ranking on being hard money because the supply is not increasing rapidly. And Bitcoin is considered hard money, right? Because it's very difficult to produce. Not only is there a fixed supply of it, but have you tried to go out and mine Bitcoin? It's hard to do, right? So it takes a lot of energy to do. And then when you mine it all, it's gone. There's no more to do. And there's a very distinct, the stock to flow is predictable because you know exactly how much is going to be produced every year. So it's much more mathematical than gold. We don't know. Somebody might find a gold mine and they're like, oh my God, we have so much more gold than we thought, you know, or like it could dry up, you know? Yeah. So the hard money, like gold or Bitcoin, they're resistant to debasement. And the debasement means how much is it diluted by creating more of it, basically. And it generally has like a more stable price. Okay, so then soft money is basically the opposite of that, right? So it's any money that can be produced very easily with low cost, like doesn't take a lot of energy, you know, it's very easy to do. And pretty much every modern fiat currency falls under this category because they can print it, and the banks, the central banks, just say, let it be done. So it's pretty easy. So it's very susceptible to inflation and debasement.
So we've talked about how the gold was the gold standard in the United States and was backed, and that all happened. But what about the other currencies of the world?
Oh, great question. We will get there too.
Oh, okay.
Not good. We'll just say that. I mean, the quick answer to that is that pretty much every other fiat currency has failed. There aren't many currencies that still have existed for a very long time, except for the British pound. The British pound has been around for like 1,000 years. But the pound for a very, very long time was backed by hard money. And it only recently, like, you know, mid 20th century, like, not backed by gold anymore. So it's kind of also a recent change. So it's hard to say. We don't have a lot of history on our side. And the history that we do have is not promising. Yeah, and the difference between hard money too and soft money, I think, is interesting. Is the soft money like we have, it really encourages spending and borrowing because you don't really know, because there's like so much of it. So like, whatever, I'll just spend it. It's, you know, so abundant. Whereas hard money, there's a fixed supply and it's harder to produce, right? So it actually encouraged people to save and think more long term. Which you see in reality, like people spend US dollars like it's nothing. But most people will hold on to gold and they don't really sell it. You know, you don't use the gold. Okay, so that's hard money. And then there's sound money, which is related, but a little bit different. So sound money just means that it maintains its purchasing power over time. So hard money is sound money, but like hard money basically leads to sound money that maintains its purchasing power over time. Does that make sense? So it has low inflation. You can predict the value over time. It's a store of value. You're not worried about it losing its value, essentially. And that would be sound money. Okay, so what happened in 1971? In 1971, that's when Nixon abandoned the gold standard. It led to unlimited money creation. There were severe economic consequences and boom bust cycles. So essentially what's happened is this has been related to inflation rising rapidly, which also creates this wealth gap that we're seeing, this like very widening of the wealth inequality. And then you have asset bubbles, because those are created because the central banks print money and it injects money into the economy, and then people spend it and they buy stuff, but it creates a bubble. It's like it's not real growth. It's not real economic productivity. It's just, oh, well, dad just gave me some money and so I'm going to spend it. So it creates these asset bubbles where people are like, oh, it's so valuable, but like it's not really, because what is that money being backed by? And it's generally led to like more economic volatility, wage stagnation. Wages are just not really moving. So yeah, so the economists generally draw a direct connection between these trends and the removal of money's physical backing. So this is the purchasing power of the US dollar from 1913 to 2019, so about 100 years. And this is a combination of inflation, which is the cost of goods and services increasing in value, but also just the debasement of currency. So now there's more of it, so it's just worth less. This website's just called "What the Fuck Happened in 1971," and it's just graph after graph of like kind of what's happened. And there's little arrows that point to the year when the gold standard was abandoned. So like growth and productivity has stayed the same, but per hour of compensation, it's basically stayed flat. Here you can see, right? So this is the real GDP. But then when you say what's the average real wage per inflation, it's flat. So even though GDP is increasing, it's not actually increasing. This one is basically saying that, so the red line is the top 1% of earners, and this is their income growth. So it was pretty much the same, right? And then the top 1%, their income growth kind of stayed stable until the 80s, and then it's completely taken off. Whereas the bottom 90% of earners, since the gold standard was abandoned, their wages have stayed flat, while the 1% wages have increased exponentially. So this is what's creating the wealth inequality. Income compensation at the top has risen sharply. This is the top 1%, the top 0.5%. This is another wealth inequality, share of the 1% relative to the bottom 90%. This is interesting. Real GDP per capita of the median male income has stayed flat, whereas for women, it's actually increased. So like male wages have not increased, while women's have.
Is that mainly because there are more women earning money or some other reason?
Well, yeah, this graph is actually showing the percentage of households, right, that have the percent of working married couples, right? So the purple line is the increase, what percentage have both spouses working. So yeah, after 1971, that increased, whereas husband only working households decreased. Wife only working household increased slightly. Not sure about that, but anyways, income inequality in the United States.
That chart correlates to when we decoupled from gold.
Right here is when we decoupled from gold.
Yeah. And ever since then, income inequality has skyrocketed. And nobody really talks about that. Nobody really talks about, how we ended up in this place, why things are the way they are, both economically, but societally, and how you can correlate it to that. That's really interesting. Thanks for showing that graph.
Now we're in inflation. So this red graph is the price of a can of Campbell's tomato soup, which was flat literally until 1971, and then it skyrocketed. Cumulative inflation for the last 100 years was pretty flat literally until the gold standard, and it skyrocketed. Consumer price index skyrocketed in 1971. Electricity, food, fruit skyrocketed since 1971.
Hard not to make that correlation assumption.
Okay, this even goes back as far as 1620 in Amsterdam. This is housing prices from back in the 1600s. This
Unbelievable.
standard was abandoned, and now it's skyrocketed. This is why Gen Z and millennials are pissed off, because it used to take 2.4 years to save to buy a house in 1970, and after the gold standard was abandoned, now it takes 7 years to save to buy a house. Home value has changed, but home value is not up. Incomes have stayed the same. This is currency crashes since like the 1800s. We had currency crashes in the Napoleonic Wars. We had no currency crashes until 1971, and then we had a surge of currency crashes because they're not backed by anything. This is all major currencies have depreciated over the past century relative to gold. This is gold. This is other currencies have gone to zero.
So has this benefited or caused the explosion of billionaires?
Yes.
And how?
Yes, it has. Because when you print money, the people who benefit from the printing of the money are the people with money, because they're closer to the money. So like people in banking, the institutions, they benefit from that. It takes a longer time for the money to get from the banks down to the grocery stores, to the people, to the incomes, right? Okay, so somebody asked like, okay, so what happens with fiat currencies? I forget who asked that question. Okay, well anyways, so the average lifespan of a fiat currency throughout history is 27 to 35 years. The US dollar is going on like 50 years right now.
What do you mean by 50 years starting from 1971? Is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
because until 1971, it was backed by gold. So
Oh,
it wasn't
not. It was not a fiat. I see. Right.
Yeah. So it's only been fiat since 1971.
Okay.
So it's been about 50 years, but the average lifespan is 27 to 35 years. And the thing that causes, so you're like, okay, well, what causes these currencies to fail? Hyperinflation. So when there's extreme inflation, that's the first one. But that's typically can be because we're in a war, there's political instability, we're not trusting the way that the money is being managed by the central bank, so some economic mismanagement, but it generally comes from hyperinflation, and this causes most currencies to collapse. So to bring it back to like what is money, right? Money is just the thing that you use, right? So what is what is money to you guys? I mean, to me, it's the thing that I use to go get the things that I want, the assets that I want, right? But I may want to, for the things that I want to spend money, like the thing that I want to use as currency may not be the same thing that I want as the store of value. Like I don't necessarily want to store my money in US dollars because it gets debased and decreases in value, inflation, and it's unstable. It's at the whims of our political uncertainty, you know? So for me, I would feel much more safe keeping it in something that is is better money with a better store of value. Monique, yes.
Yeah, I think just to bridge this discussion, basically what you're saying is that if the system continues the way it is, which we all think it will for some time until they can come up with a magical solution, our money is being debased.
Mm-hmm.
It's losing its purchasing power. Things are becoming more expensive because of it, and that is going to continue into the foreseeable future, meaning that even if you invest your money in the stock market, right, you're just keeping up with inflation. You're not actually building wealth. You're just keeping up with inflation, if that. And things are just going to continue to go downhill until maybe even a situation where the dollar is worth nothing if like all the house of cards falls apart. Correct? Am I
Yep.
right?
Yes, yeah, you're absolutely right. So inflation is actually pretty low right now, but what we have is the long-term debasement of our money is not. So there's inflation and there's debasement, right? So, but total together, your money's being debased about 10% per year. That is a lot more than the inflation that you're being told. Right? They're not telling you how much they're debasing the currency every year. 10% per year, that's exactly how much the stock market makes on average. So what you're doing is you're investing, you're taking on a lot of risk to literally just keep up with the pace of debasement. So yeah, you're not building any wealth. And this is why people feel like they're behind. They're like, I'm working so hard. I'm working so many hours. I'm working so hard. And I can't, I'm not building any wealth. I'm literally still just like paycheck to paycheck. Like what the fuck is going on? The problem with this is that this incentivizes people, or they honestly, they have to continue to take on greater and greater and greater risk to beat the stock market, to somehow beat the currency debasement. And so that's why you see the rise of sort of these like, you know, it's more gambling, the meme coins, you know, we've got the GameStop shit, like, you know, it's because people are desperate to be able to somehow build some kind of wealth because they're not doing that in the stock market. And it's risky. And now with more and more political instability and like what's going on in the markets, it's what you typically saw as safe haven assets, like putting your money in bonds, is not even safe anymore. It's decreased.
What happens?
The last decade. So if you would put your money in bonds over the last 10 years, you've lost money. So there's no safe havens, and anything else you put your money in is extremely risky, right? So yeah, it's incentivizing people to take on a lot more risk, and they're still not able to keep up with the pace, and it's fucking people over, and people are pissed. So we need a better solution. Yes. To this, the essential properties of money, how does gold and Bitcoin stand up? This is the question I'm asking you.
Well, Bitcoin does meet the criteria better than gold.
On all of these? Because I would say one of them.
On all of them, except for right now, portability, because we don't have a system in place.
Acceptability, I think, is the
No, it is very portable. I mean, you can hold it on your phone. You can literally
have the acceptability one. Okay, fine.
But it's not
what I really meant. Yeah.
Because it's not widely recognized or accepted yet. But
yeah.
Yet. But if enough people believe that this is a better sound hard money, then it will eventually be accepted and be widely recognized.
And there are people, you know, every now and again, I will mention to somebody like, so what do you think about Bitcoin, right? And they'll almost always, it's like, no, because it's not backed by anything. And the argument that I have made is neither is the dollar. You know, we only agree that it's valuable. It's not that in of itself, these pieces of paper have any intrinsic value at all. So, and I loved your fun fact that only 1% of transactions actually happen in actual cash. Like we're already 99% digital.
Yeah.
I think people don't really understand. I did not really understand that the money wasn't backed, really, like until very recently with all of this, trying to figure this out. Like it's just not part of vernacular in a normal conversation. Like I just never really thought about it. Like I knew it happened back in there, but I never associated it with Nixon. Now it all makes much better sense. It's just all the things together at the same time in the right moments, but I mean, this has been since January building for me, but like, I don't think the average person really gets it when you would say that. So you have to be prepared with like a whole slide deck if you want to start asking them, well, what do you think about Bitcoin?
Hence the reason that I say things like we need to have, some really clear, easy to digest educational materials, because that is a problem. People don't understand how the system works. 99% of the people probably don't understand how it works. They just know that they go to work, they get their money, and they struggle from paycheck to paycheck, in order to survive. That's all most people know.
And I think a big challenge with this is also that I think I read a stat that more than 50 or 60% of Americans are reading at like a 6th grade reading level.
I was just going to say, I also, when I'm trying to figure out financial stuff, it's difficult. Like it's hard to comprehend. And Carly, for a note, I'm now very curious what was happening at the time that made Nixon decide to uncouple the gold. Like,
I have his answer if anybody cares.
Please share.
The Richard Nixon decoupled the U.S. dollar from gold in 1971, ending the Bretton Woods system, primarily because the system was collapsing under pressure. Here are the key reasons: trade deficits and gold drain. After World War II, the U.S. had most of the world's gold and a strong economy. But by the 1960s, the U.S. was running large trade deficits and spending heavily on Vietnam War costs and domestic programs like the Great Society. Foreign countries accumulated dollars and began converting them to gold, draining U.S. gold reserves. Then, number 2, confidence crisis. The official price of gold was $35 an ounce, but market demand suggested gold was worth more. Speculators and foreign governments started doubting the U.S. could maintain gold convertibility. A run on U.S. gold was brewing, and if it continued, the U.S. would run out of gold entirely. Number 3, limited monetary flexibility. The gold standard restricted the Federal Reserve from expanding the money supply. To fight recession and unemployment, Nixon needed more monetary flexibility, which gold convertibility prevented. Number 4, political calculations. Nixon was up for re-election in 1972 and wanted a booming economy. Loosening monetary policy via ending gold convertibility allowed for stimulus, helping reduce unemployment temporarily. As a result, we had the Nixon Shock. On August 15, 1971, Nixon announced the suspension of gold to dollar convertibility, a 90-day wage and price freeze, a temporary import surcharge. This move ended the Bretton Woods system and began the era of fiat currencies, money backed only by government decree, not by gold or other physical assets. There you have it.
Yeah, so essentially, they needed to pay for things that they didn't have the money for anymore.
Right.
It's a problem because as citizens who are working for money for US dollars and that are putting the US dollars into their retirement account so that they can live when they're older, that money isn't going to be worth that much in the future. And that's why you should care. Like, that's why it's a problem for everyone, especially not the 1%, but like the other 99%. So to end with like what a more philosophical take on what money is. We have Michael Saylor has been the proponent of this idea of money is energy, which we kind of touched on. You know, you get money, and then later you can use that. You know, you spend energy to get the money, right? But he talks about it a little bit differently, and so I wanted to play this because I cannot describe it. And if you don't understand it right away, that's understandable.
The conversation reshaped my worldview a lot too, because he framed money as energy, which I had often thought of money as time. And it explored those connections a lot in my writing, but looking at it as energy, and then his supposition that the purpose of life is to basically channel energy across space and time. So we're just trying to figure out how to channel more energy across space and time toward the satisfaction of aims. And his definition, or his answer to that question, what is money, is that money is the highest form of energy a human being can channel. So it's a claim to all other forms of energy we can manifest in the world. And that just completely reshaped how I see it, brought in this whole other side to my intellectual explorations of money.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? So I understand money is time, which is in itself a really powerful idea. But money is energy, channeling energy. Can you break that apart?
Yeah. So I guess definitely have to check out the whole series to really get his perspective, but I'll do my best to condense it. Life itself, all forms of life are, they're dependent on energy, right? Energy fuels everything, fuels life and action and motion and all of that. And we could say that maybe like a plant is harnessing solar energy and then reallocating that into growth. So its aim is to grow towards the sun, right? So it's allocating energy towards its goal of harnessing more solar energy, kind of thing. So, and humans too have evolved to figure out how to harness energy in different ways to satisfy higher and more complicated aims. So the original energy network that he referenced was fire, right? We actually learned to wield fire as a tool in and of itself. So not only are we learning to channel energy, but we actually learn how to isolate energy as a tool in and of itself. And so we went into that, how harnessing fire had changed human beings. And actually, this is one of the earliest examples too of a coevolution between tool and our biology, because when we developed fire, we developed cooking. And cooking is, you can kind of think of it as pre-digestion in a way. We're liberating these macronutrients or making things that otherwise would not be digestible, edible. And it increases the efficiency by which we extract nutrients from food. That's what cooking does. So when we figured out cooking, we liberated all these digestive resources that were reallocated towards higher cognitive development. So there's this evolutionary path between figuring out fire and us becoming smarter, which was interesting. Some other early examples he went into were missiles and hydraulics. So missiles being, we learned to hunt at a distance. We can't bring down a woolly mammoth maybe with spears and up close and personal force, but we could with spears and javelins and slings and whatnot. And then he went into how we've used water to channel hydraulic energy. So we can basically overcome gravity. We can move, there's theories that the pyramids were constructed the blocks were moved using hydraulic energy or using water. Clearly we use like cargo ships and whatnot to move things much more efficiently across water than we could the land. So his whole view is how we keep figuring out better ways and more efficient ways to harness energy and channel it. And in that perspective, money has always represented a claim on all other forms of energy. So whatever energy couldn't be channeled towards something useful in the economy historically would go into gold mining. So gold became this residual, this token of the excess energy created by the market economy. And then you could take that token of energy and use it to redeem for any other form of energy or any other products of energy itself. So I guess it's my best approximation of it. And it just really shattered my worldview again, because I'd always thought about it as time, like we spend time sacrificing to obtain money that we then redeem for commensurate sacrifices from others, but I'd never considered it purely as energy. And then it also ties back into gold, where there was an energy expenditure necessary to obtain gold. So there's a proof of work associated with obtaining gold that protected its market value, right? So you had to expend, again, if market value of gold's 2,000 an ounce, you had to expend 1,900 an ounce mining. So it kept producers honest in a way.
A tiny bit over my spiritual head, a little bit.
I think it's more scientific than
But she
spiritual.
likes to be spiritual, thusly, because it's scientific, it's a little bit. But you know, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, the thing that this was all about, you know, converting energy into value, and gold isn't just valuable because somebody had to work to mine it. It's also valuable because you can do things with it, make pretty gold jewelry. You can use it in circuitry. There's a lot of uses for it, which also makes it valuable. I don't know how that factors into anything. So the obvious next point that Saylor is going to make is, I mean, he was basically talking Bitcoin, you know, proof of work and converting energy into something valuable, blah, 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 which is the whole basis for Saylor's point of view that money is energy and Bitcoin is the perfect money because it's sort of this perfect correlation between energy and value.
But if you think about just what you said about gold, and that it has these other purposes, you can make a gold wedding band with it. And it also is in components for your phones in small amounts or other things. Bitcoin doesn't have, we're not making jewelry. It doesn't have, it's purely, it's its purest form of.
Utility is as a store of value and a currency, which is that not value in itself?
Well, I'm just saying, as far as the differences of why something would be more valuable, because it had multi-uses, you know?
Well,
More, in terms of value.
I argue that, so when we talked about this, so I believe that Bitcoin actually has the most use cases, because if you take gold, right, it's a really good store of value, but it's not actually a very good currency. At least not in today's day and age. It's not a good currency, right? But it is a good place if you're like, I have this extra money and I want to store it somewhere, not in US dollars. I'm going to store it in gold. That's a good long-term store of value, right? But it's not a currency. And then you have things like the US dollar, which is, it makes for a really good currency because everybody accepts it everywhere. You've got this paper that you can just hand to somebody. You can, you know, go to an ATM, you can get something and like throw it down on the table and pay for stuff, right? So it works really well as a currency to buy and sell, exchange goods.
Which we're operating under the assumption that this is not a society that is decided to disconnect from the rest of the world and operate on a barter system.
Exactly.
You know, because that's just not sustainable for the world as it is today. It just isn't. As lofty as a concept as it could be, it's just not a sustainable solution for today's world.
No, we can't. I mean, we are not.
We need currency.
We need it in this current society that we live in. Right. But my point is, so US dollars makes for a very good currency as long as people still use it and it blah, blah, blah. But it's not scarce. It's not durable. It's not a good store of value, right? It's not a good store of value unless it's backed by something else that is a good store of value.
And I'm assuming that we don't have enough gold to simply say, let's just back the dollar by gold again. Like, why not do that? Is that an idea that's on the table, or it doesn't work?
I don't think that idea is on the table.
But it's not on the table for a reason. Like, we don't have enough, or like, it's not on the table for some reason.
Yeah, it's not on the table. Well, because it's not. So if you have a better money, why wouldn't you use the better version? If you come out with something better, then you use that. You don't go back to something that's not as good.
Well, up until we decoupled, wasn't it fine?
Yeah, but now Bitcoin exists, and it's better.
All right, so are they thinking
debate, I guess, at that point?
Are they thinking that they would then recouple with Bitcoin?
I don't know. We'll see. And also, let's keep in mind, this is a very US centric conversation that we're having, and Bitcoin has utility for countries other than the US. There's lots of other people around the world that don't have access to US dollars, and they are already living in countries with declining currencies that are going to zero, and they cannot store their wealth in their local currency. It's not possible. So they have to store it somewhere else.
Do we know the demographics of who owns Bitcoin right now? Like,
we don't have that information. We just have we have an estimate on what percentage of the world has Bitcoin, which is very low. It's like 0.2% or 0.002% or something really low like that. But I mean, there's a lot of people in the world. But there's a lot of people in other countries who, right now, the US dollar, they all want US dollars because that's better. But what happens when the US, I mean, if the world comes out with a better store of value than the US dollar, then the money is going to go there. And it is, because you don't need a bank account to buy Bitcoin, to hold your money there, right? So a lot of people in foreign countries, their governments won't let them hold US bank accounts. They can't get a US bank account. Their banks won't let them hold US dollars. Their governments ban them from it, like China. So what do they do instead? They can buy Bitcoin because they don't need anybody's permission to buy it and store their money there.
Yes, they don't.
We do still need to solve the problem of how a person without internet access can.
Most of the world has internet access now, though.
I mean, well, yes, but they might not have a computer, or they might, you know what I mean? Like, how are they buying the?
So you don't actually need internet access to hold Bitcoin. The device,
how do they buy it? There's a
I don't know, but I know that in El Salvador they're trying that now, right? So they have things like Bitcoin ATMs where you can load up your Trezor with Bitcoin, or you can go from your Trezor to the Bitcoin ATM and then deposit for the local currency to pay for stuff and stuff like that.
I read about El Salvador. They're having a little bit of a problem getting people to acknowledge and accept and work with it. But I did read that they were doing that. Have you covered all of your material?
So yeah, this was my last slide, was just some critical thinking questions. So, now that we kind of have like more context around what money is, what might make good money, all the different things that makes it good money, right? I had a couple questions that I was curious. So if you were to design a money from scratch, what properties would you prioritize?
I think store of value is probably the big priority. That if you put your money, if you own this thing, that you know that in 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, it will not have devalued. I think that's probably the main thing, and that's the main gap that the innovation of Bitcoin brings to the table.